Vikings, strong warriors from the north, used to live in cold places like Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They made big, cozy homes from the trees around them and had fires inside to stay warm. The Vikings were tough and lived in the snowy lands. These people mastered farming, fishing, and hunting. They worked the land diligently, growing crops and herding animals. In the cold, vast seas, they caught huge fish, and in the dense forests, they tracked deer and wild boar. The Vikings were not only land dwellers, but also masters of the sea. They built magnificent longboats, swift and agile, which sliced through the ocean waves. These boats were a source of Viking pride, skillfully crafted and beautifully decorated with dragon and snake designs. With these ships, the Vikings ventured beyond their homeland, driven by a spirit of curiosity and bravery. They sought to discover what lay beyond the known world. Their journeys were very dangerous, and they felt thrilled to explore new unknown seas. They learned to navigate by the stars, the sun, and the sea, charting courses to places no one from their lands had seen before. At night, in their warm homes, they gathered to share tales of gods, heroes, and epic battles. These stories, rich in bravery and wisdom, were passed down through generations. In these early days, the Vikings started crafting an identity that would soon become legendary. Known for their strength, courage, and skill, they were on the edge of their great Viking age. As the Vikings grew in power and numbers, their horizons expanded. They set their sights on distant lands, embarking on a grand era of exploration. Their long, strong boats took them across rough seas to places they didn't know. The Vikings, fearless and driven, sought adventures in far-off lands, reaching the coasts of England, Ireland, Scotland, and France. They met different people. Sometimes they traded peacefully with the locals, exchanging furs, amber, and silver for exotic spices, silk, and metals. These trades brought novel items and fresh ideas back to Scandinavia, enriching their culture. However, they were also tough warriors. They attacked quickly and fiercely, striking fear in the hearts of those who saw their longboats approaching. They seized treasures and captives, leaving a lasting impression of power and might. The Vikings didn't just travel to steal things, they were also guided by their beliefs in the gods and the fates. They founded new settlements and brought their language and customs wherever they went. Their encounters with different peoples and cultures began to transform them, adopting new ways of life and thought. In the heart of the Viking world, people highly respected the warriors, including brave women fighters called shield maidens, who were as strong as men in battles. In the world of Vikings, women stood strong and respected. Unlike many places back then, Viking women had power and freedom. They could own lands and treasures, a big deal in those days. Imagine a Viking woman, a leader in her own right, overseeing her lands and wealth. Marriage for them wasn't just about love. It was like a big agreement between families. But here's the twist. If things didn't work out, a Viking woman could say, "I'm done." She had the right to ask for a divorce. Picture her standing up for herself, making a bold choice in a world where women often had little say. And there's more. When she left a marriage, she could take back her dowry, the wealth she brought into the marriage. This was her safety net, giving her independence and security. In a time when women elsewhere were often in the shadows, Viking women stood in the light. They were owners, decision-makers, and fighters for their own rights. They lived in a world of fierce warriors and yet held their own, strong and empowered. This was the remarkable life of a Viking woman, a blend of power, freedom, and boldness. Viking kids were taught about fighting and important values like loyalty, bravery, and honor from a young age. In Viking society, honor and law were very important. They had a smart legal system called things, where people could talk about their ideas and solve problems. The communities were like big families. They celebrated, faced tough times, and helped each other. Vikings strongly believed in their gods and magical symbols called runes. They thought these symbols had special powers. The Vikings saw their world as a place where gods directly affected people's lives. As time passed, Vikings changed. They began to live in the places they had attacked and became part of those communities. They started farming and trading, becoming more like the people they used to be different from. But they still had the same adventurous spirit and deep connection to the sea and land. The Vikings, famous for being tough fighters and brave travelers, were also good at trading. Their longboats went far away to trade and explore. These boats carried things from far places, showing how good the Vikings were at trading. They met many different cultures and shared not only stuff, but also thoughts and ways of doing things. They gave things like fur, amber, and silver from the north, and got things like spices, silk, and fancy stuff from the Mediterranean and the Middle East. This made Viking society more interesting with lots of different cultures and ideas. The Vikings, as traders, shared more than just stuff. They also shared their stories, ways of doing things, and what they believed in. This time of trading and sharing culture had big impacts and changed the politics and futures of many countries. As time went on, the Vikings changed from fighters to people who stayed in one place. They made permanent homes, especially in the British Isles and Normandy. These places where the Vikings used to attack became their new houses. They made communities, farmed the land, and mixed with the people who already lived there. A big change in this time was that the Vikings started to follow Christianity instead of their old beliefs. This change was complicated and changed many things. They made churches and started believing in Christian things in their everyday life. This change was a big deal for their culture and how they lived together. The places where they stayed, like the British Isles and Normandy, still feel the Vikings' influence today. They changed the language, culture, and even the way people look in these areas. What they left behind is a story about how things can change, how people can keep going, and how they can adjust to new things. As the 11th century went on, the time of the Vikings started to end. The strong Viking culture started mixing with the larger Christian Europe. The old Norse gods and their ceremonies began to disappear as Christianity became more common, and the Vikings began to follow the Christian rules and customs. This time changed the Vikings a lot. Their longboats, which they used to attack and win, became boats for trading and going on adventures. The Vikings, who used to be leaders on their own, started working for more powerful kings in the feudal system. Even though they weren't so different anymore, the Vikings left something important behind. They changed things and made European history different. Their stories, what they gave to culture, and their adventures still make people interested and excited even in the future. The Vikings' story is about exploring, being brave, and making things different. It's a story that keeps going, showing how important the Vikings are in history.